Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Mrinmoy Pramanik. I teach comparative Indian language and literature at the University of Calcutta. Today we'll discuss a module from Comparative Literature, Drama in India. And the module is on Form as Language, Street Theatre in India. The content of this module is written by Sayantan Mondol, Research Scholar, University of Hyderabad. What is street theatre? Is there an Indian street theatre? Is it possible to imagine and perceive a category of cultural performance such as Indian street theatre? The history of the development of theatre in the vast geographical area of India is composed of often non-linked, independent and highly localized theatrical practices. The theatrical and other performances that draw its lineage from Bharat Muni's treatise on dramatic performance are highly specialized ones, guided at each step by rules. Such early performances, though served as the resource of many playwrights, musicians, dancers, performers, ancient drama was a product of royal courts, of temples. While the form was regimented, the content of such performances were determined by their centers of production. The temple, the religion, the royal administrative court, and their concerns were manifested in those early performances. Audience, the common public, and their participation in those performances were limited by their access to knowledge, to manuscripts, to theatrical trainings. The cluster of people, the audience, formed the mass of good abiding prajas who would partake predetermined literary sensibility and concerns in court-patroned performances. In collective recitations, as viewers, as listeners, that audience, which was primarily formed of farming or fishing communities of the villages, had their own performative practices too, which they performed and participated on occasions like harvest or some annual celebrations. Along with the high forms of the court of regulations and erudition, these forms also grew parallelly. It is interesting to note that such parallel existence of many forms of literary and theatrical performances often collided with each other even in the pre-colonial times. In consequence of their interaction, though hardly a new unity of form and content emerged in the realm of cultural recognition, but the separate and continuous practice continued. The court, the jamindars, maintained their patronage for highly grammatical forms and also started patronizing the people's cultural practices. What allowed such contradiction to grow was an imaginary parameter of appreciation and grading of artists, performances, expressions, and culture, which was socially accepted. The high form remained attached to a notion of erudition, of superiority, and the rest became the repository of rustic and coarse expression of people's everyday life. In the pre-colonial society, as both these forms were recognized and even patronized, a cultural platform to connect to the people emerged in the form theatre, which manifested in Bengal in the form of Manasa Mongol and its ritualistic recitation. However, the relationship between the mass and literary cultural expression did not reach any clarification till this stage. There were different kinds of performances what were patronized by jamindars, like Jatra of Bengal, Kavigan performance of the villages of the Bengal. These were very much patronized by the jamindars, and there was a direct access to the common people to watch such theatrical performances or musical performances which are patronized by the jamindars. But there were different places to sit, and this is how the local performance tradition, the folk performance tradition, was patronized by the jamindars, and those performances flourished, and people get a chance, the folk get a chance to make alive these performances, and it became the means of livelihood to the common people or to the folk performers. Beside this, what we told a bit earlier, that the local performance tradition or the folk performance tradition not only patronized by the jamindars but also promoted by the temples. If we see the structure of temples in ancient or medieval India, I can take example especially from Bengal, that many old temples have their own theatrical or performative space that is called Nat Mandir, where the Jatra, the performance of Mangal Kavya like Manasa Mangal, Chandi Mangal, Annada Mangal, the Kavigan, the Nam Sankirtana were used to be performed, and the devotees or the common people or the mass, they used to come and sit around the Nat Mandira, and it was an open space of performance. This is how local performance tradition used to be promoted, used to be performed, and this is how the mass and the folk got chance to have direct access or direct connection with their own performative traditions. Colonization and the subsequent economic and political changes played a crucial role in the evolution of this pre-modern state of cultural affairs and furthering its internal debates. During the colonial period, famines, forced cultivation of cash crops like indigo cultivation, physical torture in the name of tax collection, because there were different layers of administration, and all of those people who are there in administration from different layers, they used to take the bribe from the taxpayers, like the farmers and the other labor class. And they had altered the demographic unit of village. A steady stream of labor migrated from the village in search of food, of new employment, of life, to the new space of the city. As the city space emerged, whose economic fabric was largely constituted of migrating village labor, the theatrical and other literary performances followed the migrants closely. What chapters like colonization did in the history of Indian literary practices is that he accelerated the ongoing negotiations and drove them towards new formations. As the novelty of print of book appeared and knowledge became a product of the market, pre-colonial literary performances did not remain untouched, and their coexistence with erudite forms was questioned. The rustic, colloquial language was found obscene and politically incorrect. The performances, rural or folk, were identified to be lowly and not worthy of neither the modern definition of art nor the demands of market. The theatre that emerged at this backdrop of literary mutation was the modern proscenium, and that too streamlined by Dramatic Performance Act of 1875, which censored every theatrical performance and wedged its seditious capabilities. People's larger concerns, such as food, security of life, at this juncture had to accommodate itself within the socially accepted literary norms and get subsumed by the overarching national discourse of the time. Such state of affairs had its limitations too, and in the post-independence era, as the colonial rulers vanished from the scene, the uneven lines of literary regulations emerged once again. People's causes could no more be fought against the colonizers. The new democratic governance of the nation had to be questioned, and unfortunately, the treatment of the people's government towards the theatrical voices of the resistance of people's complaint remained similar as that of their colonial predecessors. Charges like sedition, obscenity continued to suppress the people's voice from the theatrical performances. The development of street theatre, or more broadly, people's theatre, in the post-independence era, therefore, found itself aligned with the pro-people democratic forces. Indian People's Theatre Association was one of the pioneering institutions in organizing and carrying forward this cultural movement. Their branches emerged in different parts of India, in Delhi, in Lucknow, in Patna. Besides IPTA, similar efforts manifested through the activities of groups like Jananatya Manch in New Delhi, Bohurupi, Little Theatre Group, Ritik in Bengal, Janakala Manch in Gujarat, Samudaya in Karnataka, Prajakala Mandali in Andhra Pradesh, Satriya Sahitya Parishad in Kerala, Duggar Manch in Jammu and Kashmir, Jagar in Maharashtra, and Chennai Kalaikuju in Tamil Nadu. These groups picked the cause of the people and performed skits, street plays, proscenium to voice those complaints. Jananatya Manch alone produced around 40 plays and approximately their 4,000 performances during 1873 to 1883. These groups took the stage and the language of theatre to the billions of people who instantly felt connected and voluntarily participated in organized demands for solutions. The local forms of storytelling such as Tamasha, Hora, Jatra, Pala, Kathakatha, Pavada, and so on emerged in the street as a bridge between this new band of performers and their audience. The success, people's encouraging response provided the much necessary impetus for the theatre of the street to develop further. Improvisations, innovations, and search for more easy and convincing theatrical form. Language technique accelerated, and a necessity was gradually felt to organize these loosely connected theatre efforts into an organized cultural movement to exchange notes and build a network among the working groups. In 1988, when the North India-based Jananatya Manch, or shortly known as Janam, completed 10 years of its cultural activism in the form of street and proscenium theatre performances, an attempt was made to organize a meeting involving all the street theatre practitioners across the country. The aim was to historically understand the evolution of the street theatre. Written for the occasion, Safdar Hashmi's The First 10 Years of Street Theatre is perhaps one of the first of its kinds which attempted to locate the challenges of street theatre on a clear material historical understanding of people's theatrical performances. This retrospection about the street theatre, which ensued from Janam's anniversary, brought forth certain concerns. What should be the form of street theatre? Which theatrical language should be used in such performances to reach out to the audience? Shall the people's folk culture be the only repository of theatrical form and language? What if the age-long practice of those forms had made them inextricable from their accompanying content, such as superstition, social communal biases? The risk involved in uncritically using such folk forms, therefore, is a real one. And it was of the revival of pre-modern and traditional dominance of erudition and biases. The next level of the challenges was, therefore, to find a theatrical language that will induce awareness among the audience who are not used to follow the language of the proscenium theatre. In other words, to reach out to the people, street theatre needed a language, a form that even the non-theatre mass can identify with, though not necessarily going back to the feudal and pre-modern standards of performances. Another significant challenge was to come to terms with the financial aspect of performances, emerging from the concerns over people's everyday sufferings, occurring on the street among the lot of a moving crowd. The theatre of the street was though a political necessity. It could neither fetch the financial support of the feudal or mercantile patrons nor generate funds on its own. At the same time, as opposed to the proscenium practices as a medium of theatrical communication, street theatre was also aiming to take art out of the market of commodities and liberate it from the control of producers' restriction over language choices, content selection. The answer to this challenge was to some extent found in the development of a form of theatre that was one inexpensive, as there was no use of prop or stage or light or even makeup. 2. Making it portable and mobile. The contribution of Badal Sarkar's third theatre, which replaced all the props with the brilliant use of actors' body movement, in this context is invaluable. Janam's first street play, Machine, used this technique to graphically present to its working class audience the exploitative and harmonious unity factor. Owners and harmonious unity, factory owners and administrative power. Besides the debate over form and content, sustenance, what also emerged in retrospection as one of the most alarming threats for the development of the people's theatrical voices was the legal aspect, and that unsettles all possibilities of imagining a national or Indian street theatre. Since the colonial period, draconian laws like Obscenity Act, Dramatic Performance Act, Sedition Act were used to curtail the freedom of speech. Questioning the authority of the governing body, critiquing their administration on behalf of the starving and dying millions was repressed by the legal power of such laws. After independence, as India stepped into its post-colonial phase and emerged as the largest democracy in the world, the expectation of a change in the governing attitude was natural. However, the history of state repression and indifference towards emerging forms of people's theatre give us a different picture. While the aim of the street theatre, as manifested in its historic evolution, was to perceive nation as a process which pays attention to its people's demanding voices, and evolve continuously, the state of India and its protectors emerged as one of the most rigid and sacrosanct ideas in its opposition to the street forms of theatre. Consequently, Indian state itself became one of the insurmountable challenges for the street art to grow. The laws still are frequently invoked to silence criticisms, demands, and questions. Theatre activists like Utpal Datta and many like of him were put behind the bars for not complying with the national standard of cultural indifference. Activists like Safdar Hashmi got mob lynched and was beaten to death by ruling political party and their goons for performing plays on the street. Such instances of mob lynching, assassination, legal pressure, and threats of the state under which the contemporary street theatre practitioners work delineate the continuation of exploitative state machinery in suppression of the people's voice. The ominous shadow of the colonial still looms large in the appearance of the post-colonial nation, which is not at all hesitant to wage war against its own people in the name of safeguarding nation. In such context, the future of street theatre, amidst the lack of the basic minimum security of street performers, looks bleak. The day is still awaited when performances such as street theatre does not need to be afraid of the state repression. When Narendra Davalkar's, Govind Pansare, Safdar Hashmi's, Jitin Maradhi's, M.M. Kalburgi would not need to lose their lives for performing, for speaking out on behalf of justice, rationality and hunger. An Indian street theatre perhaps could only emerge that day when the state machinery will stop finding its justifications in the legal penal codes, enforced literary categories, and start perceiving the platform of literary culture as a live testament of its people and get made by them rather than the other way round. Now, let us summarize the whole discussion. In this discussion, we have traced the history of Indian theatrical performance and its voice of resistance and its culture of putting forward the descent to the state oppression, to the administration of state power. In this module, we have tried to discuss the legacy of street theatre. We have tried to find out the historical trajectory within what the street theatre as a new voice, as a voice of oppressed people has been emerged. We have focused on Indian folk theatrical performances and the theatrical performances of masses. We have discussed how the theatrical performances in pre-colonial India were patronized and promoted by the temples or other religious organizations and by the jamindars. Not even in pre-colonial India, but during colonial time also, Indian indigenous performative forms, it may be theatrical forms, it may be musical or dance dramatic forms, were promoted and reached to the people by the patronization of the jamindars. From there, we have discussed the legal issues and the censorship and the oppression of British state towards the criticism of the state, the criticism what made by different theatrical performances of India or the Indian common people or the educated class of India. We have discussed the legal oppression of the state, what came to the performers, to the producers and the directors of theatre in colonial period. And from there, we tried to find a link of the oppression of the state towards the performers, towards the voice of criticism, towards the voice of resistance and dissent. And we tried to link the oppression of independent Indian state to the oppression of the colonial state or colonial government. And we also mentioned the issues, the debate whether Indian street theatre is possible at all and what is the future possibility of Indian street theatre. For your further reading, you can see the further reading list, and to know more about this topic, you can consult the e-text provided here. Thank you.